but something interesting first.
Mysteries of Lisbon, French-Portuguese production, the last completed film by Chilean filmmaker Raul Ruiz, who died, I think it was in August of this year. And a very, very interesting piece. The first thing you should say about it is that it's 4.25 hours long. It originally began life 4.25 hours.
Why?
Well, if I can finish the sentence, then it will be explained.
It's not acceptable?
No, apparently not,
okay.
no. Started life originally as going to be a TV miniseries. Now has been compiled as a 2-part film. I'm pretty certain that the parts must be playing together, but there is definitely a break in the middle. And certainly in terms of... Do you remember... couple of years ago, The Best of Youth was released, and it was 6 hours, and it was actually a TV miniseries that had been put together as 2 3-hour movies, Best of Youth Part 1, Best of Youth Part 2, and the reason that had been done was to make it eligible for awards consideration. And I saw it in one-day screening, and my problem with it was I thought, actually, I'd like to have seen this as a miniseries. In the case of Mysteries of Lisbon, it does deserve to be seen as a single whole. The story, I mean, in its breadth and scope, it plays out like a lengthy TV drama, but in terms of its cinematic visual style, the thing that it reminds me most, I think pretty much remind everybody of most, is Barry Lyndon, the Stanley Kubrick film, which was one of those films that looked extraordinary, was kind of a little bit thin on theme and perhaps characterisation, but looked absolutely. That was the one that Stanley Kubrick went off to NASA to get him to design him special lenses so that he could shoot by candlelight. So the story, which is a sort of spiralling flashback structure, turn of the century, it basically, and there's no point in attempting to do the whole story. It starts off, there is an orphan living within the care of a cleric. The orphan is reunited briefly with his mother before once again being separated by his mother, going off to a convent and discovering that the cleric has a role in his backstory of which he was previously unaware. And what then happens is that from this spirals out a whole number of stories in which what generally happens is a chance meeting, a glance, a dropped handkerchief will result in somebody fainting in a conversation. The next thing you know, there will be an illegitimate child being ferreted off to a farmhouse somewhere, and a political... It's one of those things in which...
You don't want to be dropping handkerchiefs.
No, exactly. I mean, there's one marvellous set piece very early on in which two ladies having a conversation in a very sort of posh drawing room both faint, and then later on a gentleman having a conversation faints, and there is a lot of that sort of thing going on.
And if you faint in this film, that you then have an illegitimate child.
No, it's a chance glance.
Is that how it happens? Chance glance?
Yes, that is how it happens, Simon. What happens is you drop a handkerchief and faint, and 9 months later the stork arrives. Okay, that is exactly how it happens.
I was just checking. Anyway, Charles dance, yes.
Seconds arrived for thirds, and if my thirds aren't there, you go directly to my fourth, and if they're not there, then send them back to my first. And it is, on one level, all of that stuff is going on, and yet it has a great depth, and it's a drama about social structures, it's a drama about intrigue, it's a drama about the fact that truth is always hidden within conversations. It revolves around people having very prosaic conversations in which they speak in a very formal manner, revealing things only gradually, only bit by bit. And a recurrent motif is that somebody will come into a room. The whole thing is shot beautifully. Everything looks like a beautiful painting. I mean, the way in which the lighting and composition is done. The camera moves with a very slow gliding camera, typically around a sort of tableau set, which will have a table, two people sitting opposite sides of the table, light coming in from it, and we'll see the whole scene play out in maybe 3 or 4 cuts. But somebody will come in and say, I want to tell you a story. Not I want to tell you a story, but I want to tell you a story. And they'll start telling a story, and then halfway through they'll say, that's enough of the story now. I must now take to my bed because the story has become so emotionally overwrought. And we'll get back to that story. And in the meantime, another story comes in from the side. And all of that sounds like it ought to be open to camp pastiche. And there is certainly satire in there. There is certainly knowing humour. I think the fainting sequences, for example, are no. But there is so much more than that, because it is essentially, on one level, about that struggle to ever know the truth about where you came from, where you're going, who you trust, who you don't trust, what your relationship to everyone around you is, the fact that everyone is several different people. And throughout the course of the 4.5 hours, you meet characters who are then revealed later on to have previously been known as somebody completely different. Like you'll meet somebody who's a courtly gentleman who it turns out that actually 3 hours ago you were looking at him and he was a ragamuffin gypsy who was called Knife Eater. I mean, I'm
very confused about
well,
this
exactly. Film. That's why I'm not trying to sum it up up as narrative. The best way to sum it up is to say, on a visual level, it has a painterly eye. It is composed in a way that is often, if you say a movie looks beautiful, it means but there's very little else in it. And in the case of Barry Lyndon, it looks beautiful and it's got a fabulous soundtrack, but there's very little else in it. In the case of this, the beauty of the way it looks actually doesn't mean there's nothing else in it. It means that there's so much else in what is essentially a TV miniseries narrative, i.e. a narrative that swoops backwards and forwards and it spirals in and around itself over and over again in a way that you could see that as being broken down. But because of the way the film looks, you do need to see it, I think, as a 4.5-hour piece. It was really impressive. And again, I did go in thinking, having seen Best of Youth as a 6-hour thing, and thinking this doesn't deserve to be like that. This pretty much does.
Will anyone go and see it, do you think? Will it get any kind of distribution?
Yes, although I imagine that will be necessarily limited by the fact of its 4.5 hourness. But I know this sounds like a silly thing to say. It's not that the time flies by. You are very aware of the fact that you've been there for a long time. But that's because so much happens. Entire generations of stuff happens. And pretty much all of it is engaging and sumptuous, but also has a proper emotional depth.
I might not bother.
Okay.
Just I'd say.
Fine. Well, I'm glad that I sold it to you.